morning, isn't it?
Hello, James. Terrible morning, isn't it? Your heart was pumping and your head was buzzing. Wow. It's kind of unexpected, but alright. This was so awkward. Wow. You raised your hand in greeting. You gave a smile. You clapped your hands, your eyes in embarrassment. You idly shielded yourself from viewing with one arm. You did a full 180 turn of your own back to him. He merely stared at the gate. Cheery smile. Morning. Sure is a terrible morning, isn't it? I don't know. It seems like a pretty good one to me. You aren't easily embarrassed, huh? Cute underwear. The scene left you speechless. I don't know. It seems like a pretty good one to me.
Ow.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if you're new here. My name is Death by Pony, and today we're hopping right back in to our life. So without further ado, let's go. Thank you as well. Now, in terms of decorating, if it's not asking too much, I'll pass the mantle to you at this point. Cutting the custom design stretched me to the limits of my abilities, and the final design will look far better with a more professional touch.
Is that fine?
I hate to put the responsibility on you, but it's the most visible part of the process. No need to worry, I came to help out. You can leave it to me. Thank you. Excellent. I'll stay out of your way then. You started by tidying the work surface a little, sweeping stray crumbs and fragments of the carrot cake into a cupped hand and then shepherding to the waste disposal. Baxter gathered the supplies. He brought out the bowls of frosting and arranged them neatly in a line on the counter beside the cutting board. You heaped a heavy dollop of the bright red frosting onto the controller and began to apply it evenly. The irregular shape presented you with an enjoyable challenge. The corners where the handles joined with the main body of the controller required some finessing in order to coat uniformly, and you briefly mourned the lack of proper offset spatula. Not to mention a turntable. You thought of the tools that Xavier must have at their disposal with envy. You wonder if one day you'd ever swap tips with them. Baxter asked questions about this and that while you worked. He listened to your commentary with keen interest and offered his apologies, though probably not wholly sincerely, for the absence of more professional equipment. I'm ashamed to admit it, that I've never heard of many of these things before today, or rather, I don't remember any of it. I've had a bad habit of missing details whenever Xavier goes into too much depth about their craft.
You know.
But now I'm glad for the opportunity to be educated. I could hardly complain. It was nice to have him for an apprentice, you thought. Buoyed by his enthusiasm, you made short work of the crumb coat and the base layer of the frosting. From there, you added the remaining details using a couple makeshift piping bags. Those were engineered by simply snipping off the corners of some Ziploc bags. The buttons and the joysticks were laid with the not quite black with some almost, but not exactly, white used for their markings. And that completed the illusion. The Zert had taken on the form of a modern electronic device. He stood back to admire your handiwork. It didn't look bad at all. Mom would have said that it was good enough to eat. It was never going to compete with a fully 3D creation like a commercial bakery could have made, but for a homemade cake prepared at the last minute, it would do just fine. Scott and Jude were going to love it, and you were convinced Baxter was fawning over the finished cake with a mixture of pride and abject relief. He put a hand to his chest, puffing out exaggerated breath. It's finished. We have a groom cake. With this, we can hope to see the couple's dreams fulfilled a little more fully.
You are incredible.
I'm grateful for your help, James. Truly, this wouldn't have been possible without you. He tried to point out that he probably would have managed on his own, but Baxter dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. If not for your company, I'd likely be scraping cake off the walls. And besides, I wouldn't have suggested making the groom's cake in the first place, but not for my prior experience with overnight confection catering.
See?
And I have you to thank for that. See? Oh, watertight argument. You simply have to accept my appreciation. He fixed you with the most winning smile, attempting to dazzle you into submission. You shrugged, not wanting to disagree with something he was clearly so certain of. Plus, it was nice to be praised. You looked down at the fruits cake of your combined labor. Overall, you were proud of the effort. This cake, it was like you and Baxter's baby. Your heart did a little wobble seeing Baxter so happy. You still thought it a bit silly to be so moved by cake. If anything happened to that cake, you'd probably die. You were mostly glad it was over with. Very excited, D. Baxter. Really excited. We do love this man. With the utmost care, Baxter proceeded to put the cake safely into a container and stow it with the fridge, arrange the things, so that it had its own dedicated shelf for ease of retrieval. A glance at the clock on his wall showed it past 1 in the morning. Oh no, you hadn't counted on finishing up that late. Baxter's expression tense. He realized the same issue. Then his shoulders slumped as he managed a gripe of displeasure at the back of his throat. It'll be almost 2 a.m. by the time you get back to Scott and Jude's house. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have been better prepared. Are you at least able to let yourself in? Oh no, speaking of being better prepared, you should have definitely thought to ask Jude for a spare key. Oh, I don't, sorry. Baxter's bar fluttered once again, and he began to worry his bottom lip with his teeth. You could almost see the machinery turning over in his brain. I see. It's far too late at night for us to wake them up, not with their extremely important day today. He ran a hand through his hair, letting his head fall back and sighing with exasperation. This had been a complete failure on my part, it seems. I'm not a very good planner.
Forgive me.
I can apologize, James. You need your rest as much as anyone.
Forgive me.
If you aren't totally opposed to it, you could take the guest room here for the night and keep furnishings just in case, though it has yet to see use. You'd be welcome to sleep there, and I can drop you off back at Scott and Jude's in the morning, so you'd still have the opportunity to get changed before the event. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll sleep over. If you're sure you don't mind. Thanks, Baxter. That'd be a big help. He groaned. Great, this is exactly what you needed. You signed, resigned to your fate. Thank you, Baxter. A gracious host. Whew. Though you accepted the offer as calmly as you could manage, your mind was reeling. You were doing something you could have only dreamed of a few days ago. It almost didn't seem possible. Life could be pretty amazing sometimes. I know it's not ideal, but thank you for being flexible, James. And here I was thinking that it was my talent. His tone was light and humorous, filled with the typical Baxter sparkle, but you noticed that his eyes were softer, more restrained. It averted his gaze, seeming hesitant. I wonder if... He cut himself off, flinching before an imagined impact. He raised a hand towards you, as if to touch the hand you had resting on the countertop. He thought better of it, reaching instead over to pat you on the arm. Baxter didn't meet your eyes, or even continue where he left off. We should get some sleep. Yeah, we should. Passing out in the middle of the wedding wasn't exactly on your bucket list. The two of you promptly made ready for bed. Baxter showed you down the hall to the guest room, then rooted around one of the bathroom cabinets for a spare toothbrush. You didn't have pajamas, and Baxter seemed either unwilling or simply too awkward about the situation to offer you any spares. It was fine, you'd managed with just the clothes you had. Oh, this guest room was nice. After satisfying himself that you were settled as you could be, Baxter bade a brief farewell.
Take care.
Rest well, James. I'll see you bright and early in the morning. Good night, Baxter. Aren't you going to stay up? You aren't going to stay up till dawn again, are you? Are you sure you'll be able to wake up soon? Hey, tonight was fun. I had a good time. Yeah, you did something really nice today for Scott and Jude. You waved, heading for bed. Tonight was fun. A smile broke across his face. You never seem to run out of ways to surprise me, James. I worried it was merely an inconvenience. But I had fun too. Baxter bobbed his head before ducking away completely inside his bedroom. He closed the door. You headed into your room, went straight over to the spare bed and tucked yourself in. Sleep had the good grace not to keep you waiting, not after such a tiring day. Soon you were drifting off into a deep slumber, head empty save for the smell of unfamiliar bed sheets and the carrot cake. You were woken by the shrill sound of an alarm that you vaguely remember setting on your phone the night before. You fumbled around on the bedside table to turn it off. Sitting up in bed, bleary-eyed and yawning, you could see that it was a beautiful day. The sky was a pristine blue, the tops of the near buildings were gliding into the morning sun. You dressed and ambled out into the living room, sleepily wondering what Baxter might have in the way of breakfast. That was until you were confronted by something that chased all thought from food from your head. From down the hall came a sort of clattering thump noise, Every so often, you could make out a muttered curse sound of someone moving about. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Although you couldn't make anything out through the crack, the commotion was coming from inside. Was Baxter okay? You approached the door, curious as to what the commotion was about, and the ruckus intensified as you got closer. It sounded as though California was experiencing a miniature earthquake localized entirely in the back corner of one of the 11th floor apartments, which was in the process of upending his belongings. You caught another snatch of Baxter's voice. There was a groan of frustration, and he muttered the expression he sworn was clucking bell, or at least something very much like it. Baxter? You called tentatively through the crack in the door. There was no response. You tried again, louder this time, still nothing. Peering into the room, you could see the untidy mess of pants and shoes and other articles of clothing littering the floor. You watched as a purple button-down sailed suddenly into view and landed into the heap. Attention was drawn to the far wall past Cass, where an assortment of knickknacks were arranged on 2 sets of shelves. You spotted a familiar necklace among them. The shock of recognition came as a tingling across your scalp. He'd kept it, the souvenir you'd got for him years ago. You'd been convinced he would have tossed the thing out, or in the back of a drawer. The fact that he'd instead held on to it made you feel a complicated mix of emotions. It was sad, as it was touching. Now was not the time to unpack it, however. In the moment, you'd wanted to see the man himself. No matter how you tried, you couldn't catch a sight of Baxter from out in the hallway. Desperate times called for desperate measures. You pushed the door open, stepping a short way inside. On the same side of the room, the entrance, you discovered the opening to a walk-in closet. At the far end of the closet, you took a second to realize you were looking at. There was Baxter Ward, in the flesh and almost nothing else. He happened to be rummaging through his collected wardrobe while wearing only boxers and a pair of socks. He'd been facing away, initially showing his exposed back. Look at his underwear! Then he turned and you were greeted with a full view of his naked torso. Whew! Look at those! The funny thing is I have a shirt with a similar pattern. When your brain caught up with what was going on, you couldn't stop yourself from letting out a little yelp of surprise. Baxter didn't startle, having caught the sight of you in this corner of his peripheral vision.
Terrible morning, isn't it?
Hello, James. Terrible morning, isn't it? Your heart was pumping and your head was buzzing. Wow. It's kind of unexpected, but all right. This was so awkward. Wow. You raised your hand in greeting. You gave a smile. You clapped your hands, your eyes in embarrassment. You dramatically shielded yourself from viewing with one arm. You did a full 180 turn of your own back to him. He merely stared at the gate. Cheery smile. Morning. Sure is a terrible morning, isn't it? I don't know. It seems like a pretty good one to me. You aren't easily embarrassed, huh? Cute underwear. The scene left you speechless. I don't know. It seems like a pretty good one to me.
How wonderful.
Well, I'm glad at least one of us thinks so. Baxter spun on his feet and resumed his work without explanation. Regrettably, your eyes kept being drawn to places they really shouldn't be. And wait. You felt the blood rush to your face and your eyes zeroed in on a second mole of Baxter's, which you had never seen before. It was the rear side of his left thigh, very high up. It had always been covered by clothes. Even shorts of reasonable length would do the trick. You might never have seen it if not for this, whatever it was. You wrenched your gaze away and silently berated yourself for ogling while his back was turned. So, are things okay in here? You momentarily lost your grip on language. Is he good? Baxter gave a terse sigh, his fingers continuing to comb through a selection of shirts and jackets. They could be better. Let's put it that way. I'm sorry my room is in such a state. You've caught me with my pants down in more ways than one. I simply can't find my work uniform. It's not an official matter, but there's a particular shirt I always like to wear when on duty at weddings to help identify me as staff, see?
I swear.
But it's missing. What I should have done was take in the time to set my clothes out last night. Fortunately, I was distracted with baking and frosting a new guest in my home. His features took a pinch agitated quality, his eyes darting distractedly about the room. Either way, I have to hunt it down or we're going to be late. A faint edge of panic began to creep into his voice. He started to upend this closet with increasing urgency. Oh, wow, yeah, that is extremely not good. I can't believe you conned me into thinking you'd gotten better with mornings. Is there something I can do to help? Can't believe you conned me. Baxter let out a short bark of a laugh, catching himself by surprise. It was never intentional, I promise. You overestimate me. I always loathe the early hours of the day. I merely learned to channel that hatred more productively. There's always seems to be something waiting to go wrong. Baxter grumbled as he relentlessly shifted through the closet, and much to himself as to anyone else, you wondered if he had a habit of thinking aloud when he was alone. Part of the tragedy of adult life is learning to roll with the punches, so to speak. I suppose I should be proud of the fact that I can at least handle it much better than when I was younger. Thinking about what kind of panic a younger Baxter would have been thrown into the prospect of missing a shirt on an important day. He made a comical sputter of disgust, like he was experiencing a full body shiver. He smiled, recalling the first time you'd ever interacted with Baxter this early in the morning. It had been left such a strong impression, you'd doubt you'd ever forget. He'd been so flustered, it was like you'd stumbled across a whole different person, wearing Baxter's pajamas and face. Nothing like the man you now knew, who was frustrated, sure, but still managed to approach the situation without letting it crush him, even in just his boxers. Your brain couldn't help but remind you of a strange coincidence that Baxter almost undressed in front of you on the other occasion 5 years ago. There was no almost about the present situation. You wondered how your past self would have reacted if you were really somehow able to tell him about this. It was a good thing you couldn't, really. His mind might have burst. Back then, you hadn't got to see the little pinch to Baxter's waist, or the flare of his hip bone, the way the snug fit of his boxers accentuated. Actually, you needed to stop thinking for a minute. Aha! There was a sudden shout of euphoria from the back of the closet, jolting you out of your train of thought. Baxter stumbled back into the room, a black button-down clutched victoriously in one hand. Hallelujah, I found it, finally!
Honestly.
A close call, if I ever had one. I appreciate you coming in to lend your support, James. If you don't mind giving me a minute, I'll be dressed in with you shortly, although... He gave a small giggle, looking down at himself. Since you've already seen me like this, it doesn't make much sense that the time you need to leave is while I put my clothes on. Still, I'm sure you've got better things to do than watch the cleanup of the train wreck. Yeah, I'll get the cake out of the fridge. I'm not busy. I'll get some water. Sure, I should go check I have my stuff together. Seeing the cleanup sounds like fun, though. I'll get the cake. Let the man get dressed in peace. Now, that is a plan. See you in a bit, then. You left him to get decent, heading down the hall into the kitchen. You brought the cake out with careful fingers and set it on the counter. After that, you sat down in the living room to wait. It wasn't long until Baxter reappeared. You were gazing out the window, then you heard the click of shoes on hardwood, followed shortly after by the man himself sauntering into view. He was smartly dressed in black from top to tail. His slacks were crisp and pressed, his shoes polished and miraculous. His shirt seemed to have survived the ordeal without getting creased. He took a cursory glance at the marble counter, spying the finished cake. Excellent. Thank you for taking care of that. If there's nothing else to attend to, we should get on our way. Readily, you agreed, picking up your bag and joining him by the front door. Short trip down the elevator, and both you and the cake were safely bundled into Baxter's car. He pulled out of his parking space and set a course for the suburbs once more. It was still early, and the crisp air wafted through the rolled windows. Baxter leant one arm on his door, cool and casual. Since we're keeping our creation a surprise, I'll take it to the venue, so don't worry about leaving it here. I'll hop out with you and say hello to the betrothed, though. Now, as for what happens next, I thought we could. The pair of you naturally waded into discussion on the minute of the wedding planning. You'd already been over most of it, but it was confidence boosting to have it all laid out one more time. As Baxter described it to you once, the wedding and similar occasions were kind of a ritual. You supposed that obsessing over little details was a crucial part of another kind of ritual. Surprisingly, you had begun to feel almost like Baxter's colleague, fellow planner endeavoring in bringing this event to fruition, you certainly pulled in the work by this point. The conversation didn't stop at your own responsibilities for the day. Baxter reiterated that he together with Terry Miranda and other members of Jude's family would be decorating the wedding hall over the course of the morning. The marriage would be conducted in the late afternoon with a sit-down dinner reception in the evening, so there was still plenty of time to be prepared. This detour back to Scott and Jude's was for you to change into your outfit. You couldn't exactly come to their big day in casual clothes. You'd slept in the previous night. You'd regroup with the rest of the crew after freshening up. Even though Jude at least knew the reason for it, your cheeks got heated at the prospect of showing back up with Baxter after spending the night at his place. It felt so scandalous. Mr. Ward didn't give the same impression as Terry or Cove, or any of the other men who you knew, who knew really. Crashing with them was totally cool, no questions to be had. But Baxter? Someone both suggestive and inaccessible. Staying at his apartment would raise eyebrows. And that was without mentioning the fashion in which your morning had started, and it was too late to take it back now. Not that you would have even wanted to. You relished the final calm before the storm until Baxter stopped the car across the street from soon-to-be Adam House. That was typical, though. This time he couldn't pull onto the driveway because there was already occupants stationed there. Shockingly, red sports car had been parked facing the road, its spotless painted body gleaming with the ever-intensifying rays of the sun. The rental, you assume, Baxter had come through yet again. It was almost that exactly the same shade the curler cake tucked safely away on the back seat. You'd bet good money that Jude, the motorhead, wouldn't be the only one thrilled to ride in it. Walking past the vehicle on the way to the front door, you and Baxter paused to admire the sleek profile and elegant curves. The Corvette somehow looked better up close. The gloss of paint was reflective. In the entryway, Baxter rapped on the door with a knuckle. You noticed that he did this in spite of the fact there was a doorbell. Maybe just another one of his inexplicable mannerisms. After a brief pause, there were footsteps inside the Scott. And then Scott was standing at the open doorway, and he greeted you enthusiastically full of restive energy. Hey, welcome back. Oh, and Baxter too. Good morning. And that's where we'll end this. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, hit like. That way I know you're enjoying the content I'm making. Hit subscribe. That way YouTube brings you back. Here's what happens next. I won't take up any more of your time. Have a good day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.